All I did was refuse to let my two sisters rent out the vacation home for profit, and it all ended with my brothers-in-law getting arrested for trespassing. I used to believe that with enough maturity and forgiveness, family disagreements would eventually smooth themselves out. But the truth is, some cracks run so deep that no matter how much you smile and pretend, they quietly rot everything from within. And that day, a seemingly harmless afternoon, just another family barbecue, was the moment when every single crack shattered all at once. My parents, Mr. and Mrs. Dawson, decided to host a barbecue at their suburban home in Durango, Colorado. "It's been too long since we were all together," my mom pleaded, her hopeful eyes making it impossible for Emma, my wife, to say no, even though we both knew gatherings like this only left us feeling drained. Rebecca and Samantha, my two older sisters, would be there. And of course, they'd be bringing their husbands and their wild packs of kids. I sighed as I drove down the familiar road toward my parents' house, Emma's hand resting gently on my thigh, a silent encouragement. We arrived about 45 minutes late, partly on purpose, partly because Durango was packed with tourists that day. As we walked into the backyard, where Dad had already set up the tables and chairs, the scent of grilled meat drifted through the golden sunlight, and instantly I felt it. The strange, heavy tension in the air. There were about 20 people there. My dad, always the calm one, was lounging by the hot tub, a cooler full of beer within arm's reach. My mom was chasing after a horde of kids, ages 7 to 11, who were shrieking like it was a full-blown carnival. Rebecca and Samantha, along with their husbands Mark and Tyler, had, well, been best friends with alcohol for years. My sisters were already flushed, laughing loudly at nothing in particular, while my brothers-in-law were in that stage of drunk where they hugged everyone and slurred every other word. Emma and I hadn't even sat down yet when the teasing started, half-jokes wrapped in something sharper. "Oh, look who finally decided to show up, and no swimsuits? Way to kill the party vibe." The words were dressed as jokes, but their eyes gave away the contempt they didn't bother hiding. Emma gave a polite smile. I forced a small laugh. I was used to it. We found a corner to ourselves, grabbed some food, poured a cold margarita, and built a little shield of distance around us. I made small talk with a few of my parents' older neighbors, the only ones who still seemed sober in this mess. About 45 minutes later, just as I was deep in a conversation about hiking trails with one of the neighbors, I caught a blur of motion out of the corner of my eye. Kids? My nieces and nephews, giggling hysterically, charging straight at me with clear intentions to push me into the pool. In that instant, survival instinct kicked in. I sidestepped easily, being much bigger than them and having a lifetime of dodging family chaos as practice. The kids couldn't stop in time. They slipped, tumbled, and plunged straight into the pool with a chorus of panicked screams. The backyard erupted. Everyone else, besides my immediate family, burst out laughing. Even Emma chuckled before quickly covering her mouth. But Rebecca and Samantha weren't laughing. The kids' screams, not from drowning but from the shock of cold water, sent my sisters into an instant meltdown. Mark stormed over, shouting obscenities, while Tyler stumbled around trying to fish his precious iPhone out of the pool, the same phone the kids had been using to film their prank on Uncle Nathan. While the others rushed to pull the kids out, which wasn't hard, the water barely reached my chest, I stepped back, keeping a safe distance. I wasn't in a swimsuit. I wasn't responsible for babysitting. But that's not how they saw it. "You heartless bastard," Rebecca screamed. "You just let them drown because you didn't want to get wet?" "You broke their phones too," Samantha chimed in, her hand trembling as she pointed at me like I was a war criminal. I stood still, cold, done explaining. "They were just playing," Mark bellowed. "Would it have killed you to let them shove you in?" "Yeah, and it's not like you can't afford to buy new phones," Tyler slurred, dragging out his words. Emma tightened her grip on my hand. I could feel her begging me to stay calm. But I knew if I stood there 1 second longer, I wouldn't be able to. I glanced over at my parents. Dad was still lounging in the hot tub, detached, like none of this concerned him. Mom looked pale, desperate. "Enough," I turned to Emma. "We're leaving." Without waiting for a reply, I took her hand and headed straight for the gate. Behind us, the shouting, the crying kids, and the blaring cheap pop music all blended into a single chaotic roar. When we got into the car and shut the doors, I looked at Emma. Her eyes were sad, but there was relief too. "We really did try, didn't we?" she whispered. I took her hand, squeezing it firmly. "Yeah, and we don't have to anymore." As the car rolled away from that house, away from a family crumbling by the minute, I felt no guilt, just exhaustion. Exhaustion from trying to save something that never wanted to be saved. On the way home, we barely spoke. Outside the car window, the Colorado mountains stretched endlessly under a blood-red sunset. Stunning, almost painfully beautiful. But today, that beauty only made the bitterness sharper. Emma quietly turned on some music. A sad ballad, the low, mournful voice floating softly through the thick air between us. I knew she was trying to soothe me, but some wounds run too deep for a melody to heal. "Do you think your parents are upset?" Emma asked softly, almost afraid to shatter the fragile silence in the car. I didn't answer right away. The image of my mother's pale, helpless face haunted me. My father, he was still the immovable stone in the storm, steadfast but cold. He had always been that way. He avoided conflict by simply doing nothing. "Probably," I said after a long pause, "but I'm tired, Emma. Tired of trying to please people who never really wanted to understand me." Emma didn't say anything. She just squeezed my hand tightly. When we got home, I didn't go inside right away. I leaned back against the car, looking up at the night sky. It was full of stars, cold, infinite. It reminded me just how big the world really is, and that I had the right to choose who I kept in my life. It wasn't until Emma gently called me that I finally walked inside, hung my keys on the hook, kicked off my shoes, and collapsed onto the couch like a soldier returning from war. We didn't turn on the main lights, just one soft, warm lamp in the corner. The house felt like a tiny, safe nest, the exact opposite of the battlefield we had just escaped. Emma made me a mug of hot ginger tea and sat down beside me. She pulled my head onto her shoulder, a simple, tender gesture that held everything I needed. "You don't have to keep suffering, Nathan," she whispered. "They chose to treat you that way. That was their decision. And you have every right to choose peace for yourself." Her words shot straight through me, not painful, just honest, peeling away a truth I had been trying to ignore for years. I used to believe that blood ties were unbreakable. I used to think that if I was just good enough, tried hard enough, love would bridge every gap. But the truth is, some relationships rot from the inside out, just waiting for the right moment to fall apart. That night, for the first time in my life, I seriously thought about two words: cutting ties. Not out of hatred, not out of anger, just because I simply didn't have the strength to hold on to something that was already dead. The next morning, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Texts, missed calls, messenger notifications, a few polite, worried messages from my mom. But the rest, it was a full-blown storm. "You're so selfish. It was just a prank, and you made a huge scene. Cold-blooded. Samantha, you're a failure. Let's see how long you stay happy all alone. Mark, don't think a little money makes you better than your family. Ungrateful jerk. Tyler, you should have fallen into the pool. What a shame you didn't." I read each message slowly, but I didn't feel anger anymore, just a hollow kind of sadness. I set the phone down on the table and turned to Emma. She simply asked, "Them again?" I nodded. No more words were needed. Right then and there, I opened my contact list, selected each name: Rebecca Dawson, Samantha Dawson, Mark Dawson, Tyler Dawson. Block. One by one. No hesitation. Emma sat down beside me, handing me a cup of hot coffee. "I'm proud of you," she whispered, and I knew I had just stepped through a door, a one-way door. There would be no going back. By early afternoon, my mom called. I hesitated for a long time before picking up. Her voice trembled. "Nathan, I'm sorry. I never meant for things to end up like this." I closed my eyes. Hearing her voice hurt. I didn't blame her, but I also knew I couldn't keep sacrificing my peace out of guilt. "Mom," I said, my voice steady but gentle, "I love you, but I need peace for my own family." There was a long silence on the other end. Then, very softly, she said, "I understand." And that was it. I set the phone down and looked out the window. The afternoon sky had turned a pale, silvery gray. The wind rattled the trees, playing a quiet, mournful song. Some goodbyes don't come with tears or screaming matches. Sometimes they come quietly, on a gray afternoon, in the shape of a simple decision. And from that moment on, I knew my relationship with the rest of my family would never be the same. It couldn't. And honestly, it shouldn't. I thought I had moved on. After that barbecue, after making the firm decision to cut ties, I truly believed I had closed the door. I didn't text. I didn't call. I lived through the first peaceful days I'd had in years, quiet like the still surface of a fall lake. But just like the surface of a lake hides the currents below, that silence was hiding a storm gathering beneath it. 1 week later, on a clear Sunday morning, just as Emma and I were getting ready for a walk in the park, my phone buzzed. It was my father. I hesitated. A sharp flicker of unease crossed my mind. "It's Dad, Nathan," he said, his voice lower and heavier than usual. "There's something you should know." I sat down on the couch. Emma looked at me, worry in her eyes. My father spoke slowly, like each word had to be wrung out through a thick curtain of shame. That Rebecca, my eldest sister, had been secretly renting out the Aspen Ridge vacation home for nearly 3 years. That she'd been pocketing thousands of dollars from weekend stays and holiday weeks, while we, Emma, my parents, and I, thought she was just spending time there for fun. That Samantha had been in on it too, sometimes even arranging bookings herself. I realized my hands had curled into fists without me even noticing. Blood pounded in my ears, my heart hammered against my ribs. All those random getaways. All the times I dropped by the house only to find the door locked tight, the furniture looking rearranged like some cheap rental. All the half-hidden check-in photos they posted online, brushing off my questions with vague, dodgy answers. All of it had been blatant, shameless lies. And me, the fool who had paid for that house outright as a gift for my parents, who had hidden the ownership documents to avoid stirring family tension. I had been nothing but a clown standing center stage in their private little circus. "We're sorry, Nathan," my dad said quietly. "We didn't know. If we had known..." I shook my head, even though he couldn't see me. "I understand, Dad. This isn't your fault." We ended the call quickly, politely, like two people standing at the edge of a cliff, trying not to pull each other over. I set the phone down, leaned back, and exhaled slowly. Emma sat beside me, not asking anything. She just reached for my hand, letting me face the storm building inside. Because I knew, this storm was only just beginning. Later that afternoon, while I was washing the car in the driveway, two figures appeared at the gate. Rebecca and Samantha. No call, no warning. They just showed up, like they still had every right to be there. Emma opened the door, her expression cooling the second she saw who it was. Still, she kept her manners. "Nathan, your sisters are here." I wiped my hands on a rag and stepped onto the porch, facing two women who used to be family. Rebecca spoke first, voice dripping with fake sweetness. "Nathan, we need to talk. Family stuff. You can't keep avoiding it forever." Samantha stood behind her, arms crossed, her gaze sharp like a hidden blade. I crossed my arms too, leaning casually against the wooden railing, waiting. "We all know," Rebecca began, "that the vacation house wasn't just meant as a getaway. It's a family asset. Mom and Dad wanted all of us to benefit. You can't just keep it to yourself, can you?" I laughed, short humorless. "Family asset? Really, Rebecca? You sure about that? Because from where I'm standing, you've been treating it like your personal ATM for 3 years." She flushed for a split second, then quickly masked it with practiced nonchalance. "That was temporary," she said. "I needed the money, Nathan. You know how expensive it is to raise 3 kids." Samantha jumped in, voice sharper. "Besides, you don't need it. You and Emma live comfortably. You have money. Meanwhile, we're scraping by. Families are supposed to help each other out, Nathan." I stayed silent, staring at them. These weren't my sisters anymore. They were strangers, greedy, deceitful strangers, wearing the faces of people I used to love. "So what is it you want, exactly?" I asked, my voice low and even. Rebecca lifted her chin. "We want continued access to the vacation house, without you meddling." Samantha added, twisting the knife, "And you should seriously think about contributing to our kids' college funds. You don't have children, Nathan. Family responsibilities should be shared." For a long, heavy moment, the air between us froze. I looked at them, really looked at them, at the desperation hiding behind their arrogant smirks, at the envy and rot that had been eating them alive for years. And then, very quietly, I said, "No." One word. Sharp enough to slice through every chain they'd ever tried to wrap around me. Rebecca's face turned crimson. Samantha's jaw clenched so hard I thought her teeth might crack. They started yelling. Blame, insults, threats, dragging my parents into it, anything they could hurl. I didn't answer. I didn't argue. I simply turned, walked back inside, and slammed the door behind me, cutting off the noise, cutting off the invisible shackles that had bound me for decades. Emma stood by the kitchen, waiting, her eyes soft and steady. She handed me a glass of water. No questions, no judgments, just presence, just love. Exactly what I needed. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay there in the dark, eyes wide open, staring at the ceiling, listening to the wind whistle through the cracks in the doorframe. I knew, with people like Rebecca and Samantha, a simple no wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. The start of a dirtier, longer war. But I also knew something else. Something clearer than anything I'd ever known before. This time, I wouldn't back down. I wouldn't soften. I wouldn't compromise. This time, I would fight for my peace. And I was ready. When an animal is cornered, it only has 2 choices. Collapse or fight back. I had been cornered, and I knew I had no way left but forward. 2 days after the confrontation at my house, the anonymous messages started rolling in. No more passive-aggressive jabs, no more guilt-tripping. This time they were blunt and reeking of threat. "You'll regret this. Don't think you can take everything for yourself. Family is forever, whether you like it or not." I wasn't 17 anymore. I wasn't gonna tremble over cheap threats, but I wasn't foolish enough to ignore them either. Samantha, Rebecca, Mark, Tyler, they weren't family to me anymore. They were strangers, greedy, selfish, and worse, dangerous. They had proven that with actions, not just words. And it was time for me to protect myself. I called David Sanders, a longtime family friend, a retired police officer now living out near Aspen Ridge. A quiet man, soft-spoken. But anyone who knew David knew, behind that calm exterior was a sharp mind and a will like iron. "I need your help," I said directly when he picked up. No long explanations needed. He just replied, "Meet me at the town cafe, tomorrow at noon." The next day, I drove up to Aspen Ridge. The little town nestled between endless green mountains, peaceful enough to fool outsiders into thinking nothing bad could ever happen here. But I knew better. The biggest storms always brew under the clearest skies. David was already sitting at a battered wooden table in the tiny cafe, a black espresso in front of him, his German shepherd curled up obediently under the table. I told him everything, every single detail. He listened without interrupting, occasionally nodding, eyes sharp. When I finished, he stayed silent for a long moment. Then he said, "Here's what we're going to do." 4 days later, the Aspen Ridge vacation home looked less like a getaway and more like a mini fortress. The front gate was reinforced with industrial-grade chains and a high-security padlock. Every door was replaced with its own separate electronic code lock. A full security camera system was installed, feeding live footage straight to my phone and to David's. Underground shutoff valves were added to the water lines. Bold warning signs were posted at the entrance. Private property, video surveillance, no trespassing. Motion sensor alerts were programmed. The moment anyone stepped onto the property, David and I would get a direct notification. It wasn't cheap, but peace of mind, safety. There's no such thing as paying too much for that. When I told Emma about the plan, she didn't say anything right away. She just came over, wrapped her arms around me, and pressed her face against my chest. "I'm proud of you, Nathan," she whispered. "You're choosing to protect what really matters." I stroked her hair, feeling the edge of the storm inside me soften just a little. Family, I had lost. But this family, me and Emma, this I would guard with everything I had. That night, sitting in the quiet of our living room, the wind whispering through the window screens, I opened my laptop and composed a short email to my parents. Subject, regarding family gatherings. Message, "Dear Mom and Dad, I'm sorry it's come to this. But from now on, Emma and I will not attend any family gatherings where Rebecca, Samantha, or their families are present. I love you both, but I can no longer pretend everything is fine. I hope you understand." Nathan, I reread the message several times before finally hitting send. And the moment I did, it felt like snapping the last invisible chain that had been wrapped around my heart for years. 2 days later, a message arrived from my mother. Short, no punctuation. Just a quiet, breathless whisper across a text screen. "We understand, Dad understands, Strands. We will always love you." I sat there for a long time, the phone resting loosely in my hand. I couldn't tell if what I felt was heartbreak or relief, maybe both. That night, as Emma and I sat out on the tiny balcony overlooking the mountains, silver under the full moon, she turned to me and asked, "Do you think it's over?" I sipped my wine, watching the faint pinpricks of light dotting the distant town below. "No," I said, "not yet, but we're ready." She didn't ask anything else. We just sat there, two souls quietly leaning into each other as the world shifted around us, ready for whatever was coming next. There are moments in life when you feel like you're trapped inside a bad movie. A movie you never auditioned for, never agreed to star in, but somehow you're dragged onto the set anyway, helpless to stop it. And that Thanksgiving night, what should have been the calmest, most peaceful time of the year, became a milestone I'll never forget. Emma and I had decided to spend the holiday with her family, in a small town nearly 200 miles away from Aspen Ridge. A safe choice. A chance to forget the family drama, even if just for a few days. We turned off our phones. We gave ourselves permission to disappear for a while. The only thing we didn't expect was for the world to come crashing back into ours, in the worst way. That afternoon, as we were sitting around the dinner table, the warm glow of lights falling softly on a golden roasted turkey, David Sanders, our property manager, saw something on the security cameras. Something serious. 2 figures, Mark and Tyler, cutting through the heavy chains on the front gate with a power grinder, stepping onto private property without a second thought. No hesitation, no attempt to hide, as if they still believed the place belonged to them. David didn't waste a second. He called the county sheriff's department, triggered the silent alarm, and jumped into his truck, heading straight for the scene. Meanwhile, back at Emma's family home, we were still blissfully unaware. Our phones, left in the car, were lighting up non-stop with missed calls and urgent texts. But inside, the dinner carried on peacefully. I laughed. I toasted with Emma's relatives. I was naive, completely unaware that somewhere else, a storm had erupted with my name written all over it. Later, from David's report, I learned what happened. Mark and Tyler didn't just break the gate chain. They smashed the front door lock, the brand new electronic keypad I had installed. They pried open the storage shed door, where the ATV and sporting gear were kept. They kicked in the side entrance to the basement, destroying the fresh bolt locks. By the time they forced open the main door and stormed into the living room, likely planning to inspect or take control of the house, they had no idea every move was being recorded, every breath captured on video. And outside, winding up the dirt road, 2 sheriff patrol cars pulled in, red and blue lights slicing through the evening mist. David described the scene to me later, a mix of grim humor and pure coldness. Mark and Tyler, faces flushed, whether from alcohol or pure arrogance, no one could tell, caught right at the doorway. They tried to talk their way out. "This is our family's property. We have a right to be here. We were just checking on it for our parents." But no claim, no excuse, no half-baked story could undo the hard evidence. The video footage of them breaking locks, trespassing, vandalizing. They were handcuffed on the spot. Read their Miranda rights right there on the porch, the same porch they thought they could just take back by force. We didn't find out until we left Emma's family's house around 9 p.m. The moment I turned my phone on, it started buzzing like a hive. A text from David, "Call me. Urgent." A message from the sheriff's department, "We need confirmation of property ownership." A message from my mother, "Nathan, please forgive them. Please, my son." My heart clenched. Part of me wanted to throw the phone out the window and drive far away from it all, but I couldn't. I called David. His voice was low and steady. "Nathan, they've been arrested. It's in your hands now. The police are asking, do you want to press charges?" I closed my eyes. The whole world seemed to hold its breath. Emma placed her hand on my shoulder, just a light touch, no words needed. Enough to remind me I wasn't alone. I inhaled deeply and answered, steadier than I ever thought possible, "Yes, I want to press charges." The next morning, when I arrived at the sheriff's office to sign the paperwork, an older officer handed me the case file. There it was, in black and white. Charges: breaking and entering, property damage, threatening a property owner. Classification: Class 1 misdemeanor, criminal offense, possible jail time, fines, permanent criminal record. I signed my name. Each stroke of the pen felt like slicing through the rotten cords that had tied me to them for too long. That afternoon, my mother called. She sobbed into the phone, begging me to drop the charges, pleading for family's sake. I listened, my heart stone cold. There was no rage left in me, only a bone-deep exhaustion. "Mom," I said quietly, "I gave them more chances than they ever deserved. Now I'm choosing peace." And I hung up before she could answer. That night, I drove alone up to Aspen Ridge. I parked outside the vacation house, the scene of the crime. Some damage still visible, scars left behind by their betrayal. I stepped onto the porch, stared at the battered door, the splintered frame, the shattered locks, and I made a vow to myself. No one would ever get close enough to harm my life again, not unless I chose to let them in. I stood there in the bone-deep cold of Aspen Ridge, staring at the house that once symbolized every good hope I had ever tried to build for my family. Now, it was nothing but ruins. The front door hung broken off its frame. The hinges dangled like open wounds. Dirty boot prints smeared the once pristine hardwood floors my parents used to treasure. The kitchen, the heart of the home, once filled with warmth and laughter, was now a wreck of shattered glass. The remnants of the flower vase I had given my mother last year scattered across the floor. I took a deep breath. The stench of burnt wood from the vandalized window wafted into my lungs, a smell of destruction that no rainstorm could ever wash away. David arrived a few minutes after me, his old pickup truck growling into silence as he killed the engine. He approached without a word, his loyal German shepherd shadowing him like a silent sentinel. "We got the whole thing on video," David said, handing me a hard drive. His flashlight swept across my face in the dark, and maybe in that flickering beam, he caught a glimpse of something in my eyes. It wasn't anger, it wasn't pain, it was a cold, hollow despair. We walked through the house together. Anything that could be broken had been broken. Not because they needed anything, not because there was something to gain, but because they wanted to leave their mark. Petty, childish, cruel, David muttered under his breath, glancing at me. They really thought no one would dare come after them. I gave a dry, humorless laugh, a sound with no sweetness left. "They thought wrong," I said, "and this time, I'm going to make damn sure they pay for their stupidity." By the time I made it back into town, the clock was creeping toward midnight. The sheriff himself met me at the station, under the cold, sterile flicker of neon lights glinting off untouched coffee cups and manila folders. He spread out the preliminary report in front of me. Estimated property damage, over $7,000. 2 suspects arrested on site. Minor resistance, no injuries to officers. Full surveillance footage, from cutting the gate chain to smashing their way inside. Clear evidence of intent to occupy the property, not just simple trespassing. I signed every document they handed me, my pen cutting across the pages like a blade, severing the last rotting roots of what once bound me to them. When I got back to the city house, Emma was waiting. We didn't talk much. We didn't have to. Maybe that's the real price of growing up, not the loud confrontations or the dramatic speeches. Maybe it's the heavy silences, the way a quiet night can feel heavier than any shouting match. Emma leaned her head on my shoulder as we sat by the living room window, staring out at the distant city lights blinking like lost souls. "Are you okay?" she whispered. I nodded, and for the first time in years I realized I wasn't carrying the invisible weight of family anymore. They had burned that bridge themselves. All I had done was stand on the other side, watching the ashes fall. 2 days later, I received a letter, an actual paper letter, rare in a world that had long gone digital. It was from the attorney representing Mark and Tyler. The message was short, cold, transactional. They proposed a friendly settlement. They requested that I consider dropping the charges. They urged me to preserve the family's reputation within the community. I read it once, folded it neatly, and dropped it straight into the trash without a second thought. They had believed they could vandalize my home, threaten my safety, and then patch it over with a half-hearted apology. No, not this time. Not ever again. The messages from my mother kept coming, day after day. Each one more desperate, each one tangled in guilt and pleading. They apologized, "Nathan. Don't be so heartless. Your father and I are getting old. We just want the family together." I read every word, every blade disguised as a plea, and I bled a little more inside with every one. But I didn't reply. Silence was the last shield I had left to protect myself. I spent that weekend up at Aspen Ridge with David, hammering and drilling, beginning the long, painful process of repairing what they had destroyed. And as the sounds of nails being driven into wood and power tools echoed off the cold stone walls, I made a vow. If they thought they could tear this house down with their greed and betrayal, then I would rebuild it, brick by brick, on the foundation of my resilience. Not for them, not because of them, but in spite of them, for me, for Emma, for the real family we had chosen, for the life we were determined to protect, no matter what came next. I never thought I'd see the day I'd be sitting across from my own family, not around a dinner table, but across a negotiation table, across from me, Mark and Tyler's attorney. At the center, my own lawyer. Between us, a cold, slick table under the harsh glare of fluorescent lights, outlining every tense line on their faces. There were no tears, no desperate pleas like my mother had imagined, just sharp glances, heavy sighs, and forced bitter smiles that hurt to look at. After nearly 3 weeks of being detained, questioned, and squeezed by the weight of the law, Mark, Tyler, and my sisters finally understood. This time, they weren't getting away. Their attorney offered a settlement proposal. Full repayment for all damages to the property, payment of all my legal fees, a signed permanent no-contact agreement, restraining order, a formal written apology acknowledging full responsibility. In exchange, I would agree to lower the charges, leaving only trespassing on record, a minor offense with no jail time. I sat there listening to each term read aloud, emotionless, unaffected, not angry, not vindictive, just coldly aware. Some bridges aren't meant to be repaired, some are meant to be burned and walked away from. Rebecca couldn't meet my eyes. Samantha chewed her lip until it bled. Mark sat stiff as a corpse. Only Tyler, perhaps the last shred of reason left among them, gave a tiny nod, a silent admission of defeat. Part of me, a small, stubborn part, had once hoped for something real. A genuine apology, some acknowledgement of everything I had sacrificed, everything I had endured. But no, the only thing I saw in their eyes was resentment. Resentment that I had dared to stop letting them use me. It was pitiful and freeing. I signed my name, each stroke dry, final, like severing the last rotted cord between us. Their lawyer slid over a settlement check, $5,000 for property damages, $3,000 for legal costs, and a typed letter of apology, so cold, so mechanical, it might as well have been written by a stranger. I took it without reading, folded it carefully, tucked it into my jacket pocket. I didn't need any more hollow words. I left the room without looking back, without a single glance behind me, leaving behind only ashes and cold wind. Outside, a light snow had started to fall, soft, clean, covering the dirty ground like it was trying to erase every scar, every wound left behind. Emma was waiting for me in the car, worry etched deep into her face. But when I opened the door and slid inside, she only had to meet my eyes to understand. I was free, finally, truly free. That night we sat together by the fire, the crackling of burning wood filling the room with a warm, living heartbeat. I pulled the letter from my pocket, unfolded it slowly, read it, line by line. There was no mention of love, no real regret, just hollow phrases repeated like a chant, for the inconvenience, for the misunderstanding, due to financial stress. I laughed, a sharp winter-cold laugh. Then, without a second thought, I tossed the letter into the flames. The fire ate it hungrily, the paper curling and blackening as the yellow-orange glow lit up my face. Emma reached over and squeezed my hand, tight. No words, no explanations needed. We understood each other. I was no longer that boy, Nathan Carter, who had once begged and bled for acceptance. I was a man now. A man who had finally learned, blood does not create family. Love, respect, and loyalty do. And I had found my true family. Not in those who shared my blood, but in the woman sitting beside me, holding my hand like no storm could ever tear it away. I looked up through the window. The snow was still falling, silent and patient. Every flake a new beginning, a chance to let go, a whisper from heaven itself. It's time to forgive yourself, Nathan. And for the first time in what felt like a lifetime, I smiled, a real smile. One without bitterness, one without sorrow. I had lost the battle to keep my old family, but I had won the war that mattered most, the war to reclaim myself.